Hey folks, so today I'm going to show you everything you need to work with Git and GitHub when you're working on a project by yourself. Well, I said everything, but I'm sure I missed something, so please leave me a comment if I did. We are going to use Visual Studio Code's built-in Git functionality because I personally don't want to memorize Git commands or have to look them up. Okay, so let's pretend we're starting a new project. I have a empty folder here that I have open in Visual Studio Code. We'll pretend to do some development. I'm going to use PHP here, but it really doesn't matter what language you use for Git. So all I'm doing is printing out the number 1. Alright, it's been a couple hours of development, so I am ready to check in my code. I'm going to go over to the source control view. If Git is not installed, we're going to see this message, so let's get it installed. Grab the 64-bit installer. I'm just going to leave everything on default. Okay, Git is installed. We need to reload Visual Studio Code. Alright, we got VS Code reloaded. I am back at the source control view. I'm going to click on Initialize Repository. What it did was create a .git folder inside my project folder. So this is a local database of all the changes to my code. If you don't see this folder, make sure you're showing hidden items. Git immediately detects that my index.php file is a brand new file. It's showing you here as in untracked because I've never checked this file into the repository before. Also note that down here is the master branch. So when we did a initialize, it created a default branch and the default branch's name is master. Let's commit this file. We should put a message here that is meaningful when we read it 6 months from now. For the demo, I'm just going to put C1 as in commit 1. I'm going to click on commit. The first time we try to commit something, it wants us to configure our name and email. So let's click on git log. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. It actually tells me what to do. So I'm going to grab one of these commands, go to the terminal, execute it, put in my email address, and then do the same for the second command. Alright, I ran those 2 commands. Let's click on commit again. So now we have a local backup of our file. It's actually sitting in a database in the .git folder. I'm going to click on publish branch. This is going to copy our master branch to GitHub. First time we do this, it's going to want us to sign into GitHub. The sign in process is going to bring us to a GitHub login browser page. Let's sign in. Alright, I'm in. The browser is going to bring me back to VS Code. So it's offering us 2 choices, either to make this repository public or private. Under my account, it's going to create a new project named after my project folder. So for the demo, I'm just going to pick private. It's asking me to sign in again, but if I click on sign in with browser, this pop-up will go away. Looks like our repository has been created in GitHub. Let's check it out. Here is GitHub. I'm looking at my demo repository. Here is our master branch and my first commit, and here's my index file. I'm going to click on the commit link right here, and it shows us the master branch containing only 1 commit. We are back at VS Code. Let's say it's a nice day outside. I'm going to take the laptop outside to do some work. So I don't have internet out there. What happens? Well, I can still commit the changes to my local repository. I just won't be able to sync the changes until I get internet back. Now I'm back home. I'm going to do a little work. Git notices that I have 2 changes to sync with GitHub, so let's do that. Over on GitHub, we can see that both commits are synced online. Let's do some more work. So let's say I make some changes. This is really garbage. I don't want it. I can go here to source control view and select discard changes. it will revert the file back to my last check-in state, so I can start over. Now let's talk about staging changes. So I'm going to do some work and then create a new file. I have these two new changes, but the temp file is really not ready to go. So I just want to check in my index file. So let's right click on the index file and say stage changes. Now the index file will be committed to the repository, but the temp file will not. It'll be saved for next time. I'm going to commit and push to GitHub at the same time. Usually we commit everything all at once, so VS Code will stage and commit for us all at once. I changed my mind on this one, so I'm just gonna discard it. Let's say we are ready to connect to the database. Let's create a new configuration file. Let's get this checked in and push to GitHub. You know what? I just realized I made a mistake. I should not have checked in my config file because now my password is on the internet. Well, what do we do now? At this point, we might be tempted to look for a git command to back this out. But once the password is on the internet, we should consider it compromised. Let's see how we can remedy this. The first thing to do is to change the password immediately. Also maybe the username if you're feeling paranoid. Okay, we have a new username and a new password. Now what? Config file should never be checked into a repository, so let's ignore it. We can right click on the config file and say add to git ignore. What this does is that it creates a new .git ignore file inside our project folder, and we can specify whatever files we want to ignore. Files that are ignored should turn gray, but we notice that it's not turning gray. We can see that Git still wants to check in this file. This is because we already checked the file in before, so the git ignore file does not have any effect on this file. The git ignore file only ignores things that we've never committed before. The easy way to deal with this is just go to the project folder and take the file out. And go back to Visual Studio Code. Now Git thinks that we deleted the config file. And this is how we can get Git to stop tracking this file so that it'll be honored in the git ignore file. Now we move the config file back into the folder. Come over here to VS Code. The file is back. However, under source control view, Git no longer tries to check this file in. So now you can see that the config file is gray, showing that git ignore is actually ignoring it. Note that the config file will always be on GitHub, but since we changed the password and username, this is just garbage right now. Git is really not designed for you to mess with the history. You definitely can. If this is a password that you use for other websites, well, you shouldn't do that, but you can use git commands to destroy this commit. But there is always a risk of messing up the whole repository. So make sure you know what you're doing. Alright, it has been months of development and we are finally ready to deploy our code after this commit. We synced our commit to GitHub. Now I can create a new release. I'm going to create a new tag. So this is the first version of my code. Since this is a private project, I'm not doing a public release, so everything I'm doing here is just for my own tracking purposes only. If I'm releasing directly to my web host, I would just put version 1.0. If I'm releasing to another spot like a test server to do more testing, then I would put something like release candidate, beta, or whatever you want to keep track of your environment. For this demo, we'll just assume that we are releasing directly to our web host. Now you do what you gotta do to release your code to your production server. You can use the zip file here, which is just a package of your code. In later videos, we'll talk about how to automate deployment from GitHub. So far, we've been working in the master branch, making commits to the master branch. Now that we reached a point where we did a release, we will no longer work in the master branch. If we want to add a new feature, we are going to branch off of version 1. That way we can ensure that the master branch is clean, and we know that the latest commit in the master branch is in our production environment. Now let's see how to get started with a new feature. I'm going to click on the master branch label here, and then select create a new branch. We can see at the bottom here, we are now working in the feature 1 branch. Now we do some work. And then we'll commit and sync. So I want to talk about this difference between commit and sync and commit and push. Push will push our commit to GitHub. Sync will do both a push and then a pull. So something like the tag that we created on GitHub will get pulled down to VS Code here. And if we're working on multiple computers, say a laptop and a desktop, you can use sync to make sure that both your laptop and desktop has the same code. This is the first time we are pushing the feature 1 to GitHub, so it's asking us to create a new branch on GitHub, and we'll say yes. Over on GitHub, if we click on this drop down, it will show us the new feature branch. Let's switch to it. Let's take a look at the commit history. So we can see that everything from master all the way up to the deployment is part of the feature 1 history, plus the feature 1 commit that we just did. If we look at master, master will look the same as before. We did our first commit on the feature 1 branch. Now let's say in the middle of developing feature 1, we found out that there is a bug in the version 1, which is released to production. So what do we do now? We'll create a new branch based on version 1. And this will be our first bug fix branch. Now back at VS Code, I want to make sure that I am at the master branch before I try to branch off. So now I can create a new branch. I'll publish the branch to GitHub. Over on GitHub, we have the bug1 branch published. Since we haven't committed to it, it's going to look the same as the master branch. We are in the bug fix branch. Let's do a commit. Let's say it's gonna take us 2 sessions to fix this bug. We are 2 commits in and our bug is fixed. What we want to do is to take these commits and merge it back into the master branch. So at the end, it should look something like this. And we're going to label it version 1.01. To do the merge, make sure we switch to the master branch. Go to the source control view. Click the 3 dots menu. Go down to branch. Merge branch. Select a branch to merge from. We want to select bug1. The merge is done. Sync our changes to GitHub. Over at GitHub, we expect the master branch to look exactly the same as the bug1 branch, which has the first and second commit. Now we switch to the master branch and looks identical to the bug fix branch. We'll go back to the top level. I'm going to go to releases and create a new release. Our target is the master branch. We'll make a new tag, version 1.01. And then publish it. We'll go ahead and pretend to do our release based on this version. Now that our bug is fixed, I want to go back and continue on my feature 1. But I want to incorporate whatever the bug fix was into my feature 1. The way we do that is take what's in master and merge it into feature 1. So after the merge, it's going to look something like this. And then what Git will do, it will take version 1.01 and our feature 1 and combine them into a new commit. This new commit has our version 1.01 changes plus whatever we were working on in feature 1. Let's see how to do that. We'll switch to the feature 1 branch. Make sure we're on the source control view. Click on the 3 dots menu, branch, merge branch. Select a branch to merge from. We want to merge from the master branch. We have a merge conflict. Let me click on resolve in merge editor. The file on the left side is from our master branch. The file on the right side is from our feature 1 branch. A conflict occurs if we have code in the same line on both sides. The bottom shows what the final merged file looks like. If I click on accept incoming, it will bring these 2 lines down to our merged file. I can do the same here, and it will bring this line down here. So depending on which one I click first, that's the order it's gonna come down. So now that my merge is done, I'm gonna click on complete merge. Okay, after merging, this looks good. Let's commit this. We can see on GitHub here that there is a new merged commit, and it contains code from both the commit and the master. Instead of doing a merge, other tutorials might suggest doing something called rebase, but I find rebasing kind of confusing. I like to stick with merging. It's a much simpler concept and it keeps the code base pretty clean. Let's say we finish with feature 1. We're going to do the same thing as before and merge the changes into master. So it's going to look something like this. And then this is our 1.10 release. Let's give it a shot. We'll change to the master branch. Make sure we're in source control. Go to the 3 dots. Merge branch. Merge from feature 1. Merge is done. We sync. The feature 1 branch looks like this. The master branch should look identical now. And it is. At the GitHub repo level, we'll click on releases, create a new release for master, version 1.1. Here's our history of releases. What are we going to do with the branches now? We are going to delete it because everything we had here, we merged to master. Everything we had here, we merged to master. So those branches are no longer useful. So we are going to delete it. At the top level, I'm going to click on the branches label here. Then I am going to delete the bug1 branch. Also the feature 1 branch. Back to the top level. Those branches are gone from GitHub. Unfortunately, there is not a way to sync the deleted branches, so we need to delete the local ones ourselves. Make sure that we are in our master branch. Under source control, we'll go to the three dots, branch, delete branch, or delete bug1. Do the same thing for feature 1. Now our local branches are gone. However, if you click on the master branch, you'll notice that bug1 and feature 1 still show up here. These are our local pointers to the GitHub branches. Now, how do we do a sync with GitHub so we can get rid of these two? We need to enable a setting in the preference. Search the settings for something called git prune and put a check mark here. Every once in a while in the background, VS Code runs a command called fetch. What it's doing is it's checking the status of GitHub to see if there are any changes. So by enabling the prune command, the next time it does a fetch, it will check if there are any deleted branches in GitHub. And if there are, it will also remove the local ones here. So the prune settings should get rid of the one that says origin/bug1 and origin/feature1. Now we don't want to wait for VS Code to do the fetch. We'll just do it manually. Let's see if those branches are gone. Those are gone. I think that's about it. Using the pattern discussed in this video, we can keep our repository pretty simple. And we didn't have to memorize any Git commands. And one last thing, I did not make up this pattern. It's based on what GitHub recommends. So I will put a link here in the description if you want to check it out. It's not exactly the way presented here, but it's pretty close. All right, I would appreciate a like and subscribe if you learned something today. I will see you in the next video.